the Simplicity pattern. I'm going to make it in the 1 year size. I'm going to do view F, and then I'm going to make the bloomers to match using Simplicity S8854, this little bloomer piece. Our fabrics are, this is just a cotton woven, like what you would find in your quilting cottons type fabric. And then this is a crinkle iridescent organza. That's going to be the little overskirt. You're going to need some elastic for both pieces. And then the front of this shows some optional decorative buttons or something, and I do have some decorative buttons right here. So those are my decorative buttons that I'm going to put on it. So the first thing I'm going to do is prep my pattern. So I'm going to pull out the pieces I need for view F and get them cut out. I want to use this bloomer pattern again in a different size. So instead of cutting on the size 1 and losing size 2, 3, and 4, I'm going to trace off size 1 and trace all my markings, so I'll actually have more than one pattern. And I do this all the time. I just buy one pattern and trace it. It's cheaper. If you want to save time, buy multiple patterns. It's up to you. But today I was able to buy the patterns for $1.99. They were on sale. So for my $1.99, I can make 5 sizes. And here's my traced pattern, ready to go with all my markings on it. And now I'm going to show you my little elastic measuring trick. Instead of cutting out the elastic guides, I measure. So I'm just going to leave it attached to the paper, and I'm doing size 1. I'm going to turn this over. So I just measure for size 1, and size 1 from number 1 to number 1 is 9 inches. So I know that I'm going to need to cut 2 9-inch long pieces for the leg, and I'll write that on the pattern envelope or my cutting guide sheet my project guide sheet that I keep. Somewhere like that, and then I'll do the same thing for the waist. Here's my waist piece. See how I'm not even unfolding it completely, I'm just making sure I can access it and find pattern that I need. This is the waist elastic, and then I'm just going to measure, and I'm measuring in inches, and it is 18 1/8 inches. If I roll this down so you can see, there's my 8th mark. So 18 1/8 inches. So I'll write that down, and then I can just leave these in here exactly as they are. If I know I'm going to make this in lots of sizes, like when I did dance costumes, we used one pattern for all the sizes, I would pre-measure and write all of that down on my pattern envelope to begin with, and I had a quick and easy reference for cutting my elastics. All right, I have my pattern cut out. Here's my bloomers. I've marked all of my elastic measurements on a scrap here, and then here's my dress parts, my front, my back, my sleeve, my skirt, and I'm going to cut all of this out of my pink cotton, and then I'm going to go back and cut one layer of just the skirt, 2 pieces, out of the iridescent organza. So now I'm going to go cut my cotton out. I have folded the fabric. Instead of folding it exactly in half, you see I folded it just wide enough to get the skirt piece on. This pattern, because of how it's all the pieces that are on the fold, is going to be a little different. I have 2 things going on. I have one is a directional fabric. You can see all of my unicorns face one direction. They don't go back and forth, so I have to make sure that I cut out everything right, or I'll end up with a sleeve or a skirt piece that has upside down unicorns on it. So that's the first thing. So I'm going to lay this out in sections. I'm starting with this skirt. I have to have 2 of these on the fold. They only gave us one pattern piece, giving us one pattern piece. So I'm going to cut the skirt and the sleeve, and then I'm going to move the skirt down and cut it again. So I'm just going to slowly work down, and you can see I have this piece, it's a single layer on the other side, and unfortunately, because of the size of the pattern pieces, you can see these need to be cut on the fold, but if this were folded, it's too narrow. I can't get either of these out, so I'm just going to slowly work my way down on just this one side of fabric. The reason I'm doing it like this instead of just folding it in half, which you could do, is that it preserves this nice wide piece, and then that can be used for zipper bags and scrunchies and lots of other masks, lots of other things. So I'm going to preserve this nice wide piece down here for projects that take tiny things. So I'm going to pin and cut. Also, if you're working with a directional fabric like this, it's easy to, when you're folding over, to get your pattern slightly off. So if you can see right up here, see my little horse bodies, my little unicorn bodies, I just made sure that when I lined this up that their little hooves, their little feet, are in line, and that's just going to make sure that this pattern stays nice and even, and I don't end up with a slanting pattern on a wide piece like a skirt or a sleeve or something. It just looks more professional and is more pleasing to the eye. I just cut my first skirt piece, and in thinking about placement of my pattern, I wanted to make sure that I didn't lay my pattern, so I ended up with a bunch of decapitated horse heads or legs hanging down. So I was thinking about where my hem will be, and my hem is going to be right in here. So when I hem this at the bottom, I'm going to have a nice row of unicorns. Now, I've got to have two of these, so I want to make sure when I go to the next row that I am pretty much identical in pattern placement. So I'm actually using this pattern to line up for the next piece. And that's why I'm doing the two skirt pieces first, trying to keep these as close as possible. And I always buy extra for this because sometimes you have to actually lose one repeat. So when you think about how big the repeat is on this one, this is a good 5-inch repeat. So I may, if I need to keep these lined up perfectly, see if I were to line these up right now, can you see how they're slightly off? Now they do go up and down, so actually I'm not slightly off. It's about exactly where I want it to be. If you look at the little horse hooves down here, they line up almost perfectly. So I'm going to make sure that I have this exactly lined up and cut my second skirt so that when the side seam is lined up, the horses undulate, or the unicorn's exactly the same, and my lines are perfect, and it's going to look very intentional. Now you can follow the directions exactly how they are in the pattern if you want to. If you've sewn for a while, or even if you're just sort of have an ordinal mind, you start thinking about the order the items need to go together, the pattern pieces. And one thing I like to do is take my sleeve and my bodice pieces, and I'm going to serge my sleeve at the hem and at the neckline, and I'm going to serge my bodice pieces only at the neckline. I'm going to sew together the garment at the waist, at the side seam, and at the sleeve, but there's nothing that's going to sew to the neckline. So I'm going to finish those edges off first. So that's where I'm going to start. Okay, I've serged the edges that nothing will get sewn to, which is my neckline and the hemline of the sleeve. I went ahead and marked the front of the sleeve with a little notch on the garment so I can tell front from back, because it's very important. They are different. I'll just fold to show you. See the difference from the front to the back. So we want to make sure we can tell them apart. Same with the bodice. Here's my back bodice and my front bodice. The front is smaller than the back. So I'm going to take my sleeve with a little front notch, and I'm going to line them up. This is similar to how the raglan sleeve was, in that we don't have a shoulder seam on this. It's all gathered in the neckline. So I'm going to line these two up, put a few pins in it. So that's the front for that sleeve and the front for this sleeve. And then I'm going to, double check. This says it is 5/8 inch seam allowance, so I'm going to sew it on the 5/8, and then I'm going to come back and serge next to that so that it's not super bulky. You don't want a big 5/8 inch seam hanging out in the arm's eye for baby clothes, or for anybody really. It's pretty bulky. Now if the 5/8 inch on the side seams are fine, we can press it open and you don't even notice it, but it's pretty noticeable when it's poking up into your arm. So we're going to sew all of the sleeve parts, and then I'm going to come back, do the same for the back. So I'll have a big circle, and I'll have my whole little bodice put together. All right, here's the sleeve stitched. It's practically invisible. And that's what it looks like on the outside. And now I'm going to go to my serger, which is right next to it, and I'm going to serge next to that, and I'll show you how it looks. This is what was cut off of the garment. This is how it looks now. What you can do, so you don't end up like me and get confused, you can put a safety pin or a pin or something like that on the front bodice piece, and it just helps you keep everything straight, because the sleeve and the bodice all look so similar. So I'm actually going to do that really quickly. I'm just going to take a little pin, and I'm going to just pin across this, and that's my front garment. So now I know. So that's my sleeve, and now I'm going to go do the other one, and I'll show you when I'm all the way around. And here we have the bodice. It's just a big circle right now. So now I'm ready to do this part. So this is a little confusing. Let me see. Okay, here's my front. So here's my sleeve. So here's sleeve and side seam. So when I do that, I will have an actual bodice. So I can now serge this little area and sew them together. And you want to make sure that you get your seam allowances going the right direction and they don't twist. So I'm going to, and you can decide, it's up to you. If you wanted to, you could have serged all the way around all of your pieces first. Not my favorite way, because you can get some distortion and some trouble getting things back together, but a lot of people do like to do that. I like to kind of serge as I go, just to prevent distortion. So on my raw pieces before they're sewn together. So this is my next step. I'm actually going to put these two together, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the elastic in the sleeves and maybe even the neck before I add the skirt. It's actually pretty fast to put together. So I'm going to do my 5/8 inch seam right here next. I serged that edge first, and now I'm going to go, and when I serged it, I made sure I pushed my seam allowance the direction that I wanted it. So now it's nice and easy to put the two pieces together. This is my sleeve, and I will have a little underarm bodice seam. And here's the little bodice all put together. It's hard to tell what you're looking at first. Here's my front, there's my pin in it, but this will gather up, little neckline like that, and the sleeve's going to gather, so you get a little puff sleeve, and then the skirt is going to gather onto this. I've pressed all of my seams nice and flat, and this is the back, so you can see how my unicorns, I don't have any decapitated unicorns at the top. I'm going to have 2 rows of unicorns across the back. The front is narrower, but I have one centered row of unicorns right across there. And I folded under my 3/8 inch and pressed it, which is what the neckline, where the neckline elastic is going to go. And I did not even read. I was assuming I was going to use 1/4 inch, which is nice and narrow and still sturdy, but I'm thinking if they've only turned under 3/8, they may be wanting us to use 1/8. So I'm going to check that right now. 1/4 inch. So it's just a really tight little casing that we're going to be making. So we're going to have to be very careful when stitching it. So there's 3/8 turned down there. I haven't done it yet for the sleeve, so I'm going to turn down my 3/8 and stitch it, because I've been sewing this with white so far on the inside and it doesn't show at all, but this is top stitched, so I'm going to match my pinks perfectly before I do any of the top stitched casings. I don't mind at all having the inside being white. I think it actually looks fine and nice, because the inside of the garment is actually paler. But for top stitching, it needs to match exactly. So now I'm on to doing some skirt prep, and the first thing I did was, this is my sheer over skirt, and I just serged. It's going to be hard to see because of the sparkle. That's the back side of the stitch. I just serged it together on the sides. I didn't want to do the open seam because you can see right through it. So let me flip this to the right side real quick so you can see how, that narrow serged seam is just barely visible. If you're doing this whole thing and you do not have a serger, you can zigzag it, which would be okay, but a French seam would be best. It's going to be just almost invisible. or a mock French seam. French would be my #1 choice. French seam is not hard to do, and this is the perfect application for it. So that's why I serged that seam like that. Now on this, I'm going to just finish the edge with the serger and do a pressed open flat seam. So this skirt, outer skirt is prepped. It's ready for me to put the basting stitches in. And now I'm going to serge the edges of this, straight stitch it together, press it open, and do basting stitches. Okay, so I have put the skirt together. I've just finished the edge, done a 5/8 inch seam, pressed it open, and then I went around and finished the edge of the hem. So I have a tube now of my skirt, and you can see that my animals here have lined up pretty evenly across the seam so that I don't have anything wonky happening with my design. I've gone ahead and done my basting stitch. I start at the side seam. You can see my threads. Always make sure you leave tails and you don't backstitch. And I set the machine for a stitch length of 5. Not all machines will have that long of a stitch, but you want to go long. A 4 is pretty traditional, and if your machine goes a little longer, I would choose that. And so now I have 2 basting stitches, one at a 1/4 inch, one at 5/8. The 5/8 is the stitching line, and you always want one of your basting stitches on the stitching line, or you usually do. It just is going to give you a nicer gather. If you do just a single basting stitch for gathers, you're not going to have as nice a gather. A double layer basting stitch is always better. So this is my pink skirt. I'm going to do the same thing on my sparkle fabric, and I'll be ready to put them together. I've taken the 2 skirts that have the basting lines in them, and I've pinned them together at the side seam, center front, and center back, so it's quartered. This is what I like to call it. It's got pins in the 4 corners. And so this is all prepped to go on the bodice. Now I'm going to switch back to bodice. I'm going to put my pink thread on for top stitching so I can do the elastic in the bodice. So here's the little bodice. I've got it ready to go. So the next thing I'm going to do is sew down this casing for the neckline. Now the pattern calls for this on the sleeve to do a separate casing out of either bias or like seam tape or the seam lace. I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to just do the turn up like this. If you do the seam tape up, what that does is you end up with a hem at the bottom, so you get like a slight ruffle, and then the puff. I don't want the ruffle at the bottom. I'm going to do just the puff, so I end up with a nice little round puff sleeve like that. So that's the next thing for me. All right, I have made my casings. Here's the little sleeve casing, and here's the neckline casing. And I always start at the back of the neckline. Let me find my little hole. Here's my little hole so that I can put the elastic on the inside. And on the sleeve, I leave a little spot of the underarm. And I like to start right here. So I tack down the seam. So I start on the seam on each end, but I leave a hole. Here's my hole to get my elastic in the middle. So now I'm going to cut my elastic, and I'm going to swing up here. There's my little thing that says what my elastics need to be, so that I'm just going to cut them and weave the elastic in now. All right, I have my little safety pin that I'm going to use to feed the elastic through. I'm going to start with the neck elastic. So I'm just going to put I'm going to turn this off. Probably better lighting for you guys. Okay, here's my little sleeve elastics. Move them aside. And I've got my little dress. I'm going to go to the inside where I have my hole, and I'm going to just slide my safety pin inside and start pushing it through. Now before I get it all the way through, the neckline is longer than my elastic, which is how it should be. So I'm going to pin down the other end of my elastic so I don't pull it to the inside of my casing and lose it, because we need both ends out when we're done. So now I'm just going to push through the pin like this, all the way around. The only part that's going to be hard is when you hit a seam, or you can get caught at the seam because you're not behind it. So you just want to make sure you get in the channel behind the seam so that you're in the hole, and it'll go right on through like that. And you might have to do a little extra fishing right in those spots, but it'll work. And this is also where you can tell if you get your casing length wrong. You can see it's not very deep. It's about a 3/8 inch casing for a 1/4 inch elastic. And if you get off a little bit where you make it a little tight, your pin won't go through or your elastic will bunch. So it'll show up real quick for you while doing this. So I'm just going to fish this all the way around and come out the other end of the same hole that I went into. And you can see this is how much I fished in. It'll start looking like this, see? I'll show you real quick. This is how it looks before the sleeve is done. And you could actually leave it like that and have sort of this little loose sleeve if you wanted to. That's definitely a look, a style. I like the little puff sleeve that we're going to do, so I'm going to go ahead and put the elastic in, but it could be your choice, your design choice, to leave it just like that. Here's my little shirt. This is the front. Look at how cute those little sleeveys are. So here's my little top. It has side seams already marked with the side seam, so I've marked the center front and center back, and that's so that I can start working on my skirt. Now the skirt is exactly the same front and back, so it doesn't matter which I choose. So I'm just going to take one of the centers and line it up with my center of my shirt and put a pin in it. And then I'm going to go around to the side seam and do skirt side seam to dress side seam. And I have all of these hairs that we don't want to trim because those are the little threads that I'm going to pull to gather my skirts. So now that's lined up. I'm just going to keep going around. I'm going to flip this inside out. There we go. So I'm matching right side skirt to right side garment, center front, center back, and side seams. Quartering, everything gets quartered. You quarter so much in sewing. It's important to be able to. I always like to pull my bobbin threads. So I'm going to come back here to the wrong side. I usually, if I baste with the right side up, so I know that the wrong side is going to be a bobbin thread. And I have two different skirts. I did not baste my two skirts together, so I'm going to, my two layers. So I'm going to start with my white skirt, my pink skirt, and I'm just going to pull on the bobbin threads only, and I'm pulling them at the same time, and you can see how that pulls up and gathers. And then I can go here to the white skirt and do the same thing, except I can't find my one thread. There he is. And I'm going to gather it up. So I'm going to sit and gather for a bit, and you can see because I quartered it, I can see I will gather exactly from pin to pin so that it fits, the skirt fits to the top, and I will know that my gathers are going to be even. I can make them even in that little area, then I'll do the next quarter, the next quarter, the next quarter, and that's an easy way to get nice even pleats. You just slowly work them in those little areas instead of trying to work it across the entire front. You end up, it's very easy to shift all of your gathers, and when you hold it up you're like, oh, I have a lot of gathers on the left side and hardly anything on the right. So if you quarter and work that way, you're going to have much more even gathers. So I'm going to work on that, and I'll show you when I have it all evened out. I have got one little skirt gathered onto one little bodice. It's not sewn yet, but I'm going to flip it around so you can kind of see. This is how it's going to be. Isn't that adorable? So I'm going to just straight stitch around on my 5/8 inch. Then I'm going to come back to my serger and serge that edge to get all those layers compacted and held together. It also, because this can be, it's really pretty soft, but this can be a little scratchy, it's going to cover that little layer with serger thread that's in the middle, so there's no way it'll touch the baby's skin. So that's the next step, and I will show you the skirt. After that, all we have left is hem and buttons. Okay, friends, I got my little skirt on. It's all attached and cute, and I went ahead and hemmed the under layer, and I was doing my trimming, and I found this. Can you see this little cut in the center front of the fabric? And it's not like I've been sewing on this all day long and hadn't noticed it, and I didn't notice it when I cut it out either, but as I was looking, there's actually multiple cuts in the piece of fabric. So I actually got a piece of fabric that had been sliced in some way, and I have the dress put together. So didn't have extra fabric to cut out a whole piece. It's a whole thing. So since then, I ran to the store, still open fortunately, had to buy my fabric all over again. So I'm going to seam rip this entire thing, sadly, because it's so cute, because you can't, it's the center front too. It's got a big hole in the center front. And this is for a client, like this isn't even my, and I'm super disappointed because I had trimmed off all of my basting stitches on my pink one. Just so many things. So I'm gonna have to redo all the basting on the pink, take it all apart. So I will, I'm gonna be seam ripping the rest of tonight. Tomorrow I will show you the same thing again, put back together to this point without the hole. I'm a little, you can tell I'm just a little frustrated because I was 2 minutes from being done with this dress. I still have the little bloomers to make, which again, 30 minutes to make the bloomers, but there we are, center front of the dress. It's so adorable. So next time you see this, it'll be put back together without the hole in it. We have a dress again without a hole in the front. So the dress is done except for this outer layers hem, and I'm going to do a rolled hem on my serger for this. I think I'm going to do a little tester. If I don't do that, I'm going to do just a traditional rolled hem, but I'm going to wait on that because if I decide to do the rolled hem on the serger, I have to change my 4 thread setup. So instead, I'm going to finish the little bloomers. So I've already seam finished the bottom, and I have sewn the 2 little legs together, and I'm going to go ahead and press this open and put the elastic in the bottom of the legs next. And because I had pre-written, I have it up here on my board, what I need, so I need to cut 2 9-inch leg elastics. So I'm going to do that next, hem this up, make the casing, and put the elastics in the legs. We have 2 little bloomer legs with the elastic in them, and now I'm going to put them together along the crotch seam and pin it, sew it at the sewing machine, and then serge off the outer edge. When I do sleeves or the crotch line, I always take off a little excess because you don't want this full 5/8 inch hanging out on the inside. And there's also a curved edge which can pucker from the outside if you have the full thing without trimming or something. So on my machine, let me see if I can you see that little red line? That little red line helps you know where to line up. It's really nice. So I use that. I line up my stitching line near that red line. You can also line it up with your needle. You can look at your needle and your stitching line and line them up. But that's what I do. And then it's going to trim off a little bit. And see this, there's a second red line there. That's to help me know where the knife is. So they make it a little easy on you on this machine. But I'm going to now just trim off, and can you see it's coming off right there? Trim that off and get a nice finished edge. And I'm going to try and hold the camera and do this for just a second so you can see it come out the other side. And that's how it's going to look on the other side. All right, here's my adorable little bloomers. I just have to fold down and put the elastic and do the elastic casing, and they will be done. I am going to put a little bow in the front so it's easy for the parents to tell the front from the back when they're dressing their child. The dress is very similar front to back also, but there will be buttons in the front, so that'll make that easy for them to do. So I'm going to do the casing and then make a decision on this hem, and I'm going to show you all that, and it's finished up. And there we have the 2 little buttons. They're so sparkly. That's how it looks on the back. And sometimes I will, especially on something like this, or it's a baby's outfit and you don't want them to pull the button off, and it shouldn't pull off. It's nice and sturdy, but I will sometimes put a little of the stop fray type thing on the back of the side of the garment to just seal those threads and keep it even sturdier. Okay, time to choose my hem, and I think I am just going to go with the rolled hem on the serger, which means I have to change my serger setup. I have to remove a needle and do some things, so I'm going to set the machine up now.